In late November 2022, a family in the state of Tennessee, United States, set the table for Thanksgiving dinner. For Americans, Thanksgiving is the kind of day when, no matter where you are, everyone is expected to come home and sit together around the same table. That day, the whole family was there. Only one person was missing, and she was the very person who had organized the dinner. But no one sitting at that table knew that they'd never see her again. The case that followed would become one of the most brutal crimes ever to occur in Chattanooga. And to this day, it's still remembered as the tragedy of an American family and a Chinese immigrant family. Before we begin, there's something you need to understand. In the United States, anyone over the age of 18 has the legal right to disappear, and the police are not allowed to intervene. For law enforcement to become involved, the family has to show signs that a crime may have occurred. To prove that, they need evidence, but that evidence is in places only the police have the authority to access. Do you see the vicious circle? Over the days that followed, one mother would have to throw herself into that circle. Alone. The central figure in today's story was Jasmine Pace, born on May 29, 2000, right there in Chattanooga. Her friends and family called her by an affectionate nickname, Jazzy. Jasmine was 22 years old at the time, a student at Chattanooga State Community College. She lived with her mother and helped with the family business outside of school. She stood about 5 feet 2 inches tall and had a petite build. She loved children in a way that seemed unusual for someone her age. She'd been babysitting for neighbors since middle school, and as she got older, she volunteered in the church nursery. She was an aunt to 2 little girls, a godmother to a young boy, and she often told her family, "Someday, I'm going to have lots of children." At home, she also had 4 cats. There's one detail about Jasmine that I want you to remember very carefully. Jasmine loved tattoos, but she didn't get them all at once. She added them gradually, with each one marking a milestone in her life, often months apart. By the end of 2022, her right arm was almost completely covered. To her family, that arm was like a calendar. Around the end of that same year, Jasmine's grandmother died of cancer. She was the woman who had cared for Jasmine since she was little, the person around whom every family holiday seemed to revolve. The funeral had ended only a few days before Thanksgiving. The entire family was still weighed down by grief when Jasmine came up with an idea. She'd take the initiative and organize Thanksgiving dinner herself, giving everyone something warm to hold on to. November 22nd, 2022 was a Tuesday. Thanksgiving was just 2 days away. Jasmine spent the entire morning at home helping her mother prepare decorations for the gathering. The two of them talked about the menu and who they were going to invite. It was an entirely ordinary day. That evening, after dinner, Jasmine said she was going out for a little while. She didn't say exactly where she was going, nor did she say what time she'd be back. Her mother didn't ask. Jasmine was already 22, and in this family, the adults respected their children's decisions. The security camera outside the house captured the last images of Jasmine there. At 11:37 p.m., she walked out the door and headed toward her car, a white Chevrolet Equinox. The engine started, the taillights came on, and then the vehicle slowly disappeared down the dark road. No one in the family knew that this would be the last time they ever saw Jasmine Pace. So, what happened after that car left the house? It would be a long time before the family finally got the answer. What they received that very night was only a text message sent from Jasmine's phone to her mother. The message said that she'd been through too much lately and just wanted some time alone and some peace and quiet. She said she was going to stay with a friend named Emma for a few days and spend Thanksgiving there, hoping that a change of scenery would help her feel better. Her mother read the message and felt that something was not right. Jasmine had been the one who suggested organizing the Thanksgiving dinner in the first place. She'd been the most excited about it. Walking away from something she had started herself, right before it was supposed to happen, just to go somewhere else. That wasn't like Jasmine. It also felt wrong, because Jasmine had never missed a family holiday before. Then her mother tried to reassure herself. She thought about the funeral that had just taken place. She wondered whether the loss of Jasmine's grandmother had hit her daughter harder than she realized. Maybe Jasmine didn't know how to face a Thanksgiving without her grandmother there. Maybe she really did need to be alone. She texted her daughter back, telling her to be careful on the road and to have a good time with her friend. Then she went back to the unfinished preparations for the gathering the next day. November 24th, Thanksgiving Day. The table was set. The whole family was there. Only one person was missing. Jasmine's cousin and her sister called her several times throughout the day. Every call went straight to voicemail. After a while, Jasmine texted back. The messages were very short, just a few words saying that she was fine. No one could get her on the phone, but the text messages kept coming. It was a holiday. The house was full of people and no one had the time to sit down and think it through. Thanksgiving simply passed with one empty chair at the table. On November 26th, 4 days after Jasmine left home, a new post suddenly appeared on her Facebook account. The post showed a selfie of Jasmine wearing revealing sleepwear. The caption was very short. She was enjoying Thanksgiving with the person she loved. The first person to see the post and immediately feel that something was terribly wrong was Emma, the friend Jasmine was supposedly staying with according to the text messages. Emma knew for certain that Jasmine was not at her house. In fact, Emma didn't even live in the state Jasmine had told her family she was visiting. But that wasn't what sent a chill down Emma's spine. What sent a chill down her spine was the photograph. A few months earlier, Emma herself had gone with Jasmine to the tattoo shop. She clearly remembered the new tattoos on her friend's right arm. In the photo that had just been posted, Jasmine's right arm was completely bare. There wasn't a single tattoo on it. That photograph hadn't been taken during Thanksgiving 2022. It had been taken months earlier. Emma called Jasmine immediately. No one answered. She sent messages begging her friend to respond. After a while, a reply came from Jasmine's account, repeating the same familiar words. "I need some time to myself. Please leave me alone." Emma immediately called Jasmine's mother. Only then did Jasmine's mother truly snap to attention. She sat down, went back through everything from the beginning, and realized a truth she'd failed to see for the past 4 days. Since the night of November 22nd, her daughter had sent texts, posted online, and replied to messages from multiple people. But not a single one of them had actually heard Jasmine's voice. Jasmine's Chevrolet Equinox was equipped with the manufacturer's tracking system, connected to an app on her phone. Her mother opened the app. The results showed that the car was parked in the lot of an apartment complex on the north side of the city, about 4 to 5 miles from their home. It wasn't far, but her mother had never heard Jasmine mention that address before. Nor did she know of anyone Jasmine knew who lived in that area. The entire family rushed to the parking lot. The white Equinox was sitting there, locked, with no one inside. A thin layer of dust had settled across the windshield, suggesting that the vehicle had been sitting there untouched for several days. Jasmine's mother peered through the window into the driver's compartment. She noticed that the driver's seat had been pushed far back. As you already know, Jasmine was only about 5 feet 2 inches tall. That meant someone else had driven this car. The family decided to call the police right there at the scene. That night, a patrol officer arrived at the parking lot. He listened as the family explained what had happened and wrote down everything they told him. But Jasmine was 22 years old, and the police noted that she'd left messages saying she wanted to be alone. The officer told them that they'd done an impressive job finding their way there on their own, but at that moment, there was nothing more the police could do. Still, after hearing the family's anxious pleas, the officer entered Jasmine's name into the National Missing Persons database and forwarded the case to the specialized unit that would handle it during regular business hours. But Jasmine's mother did not stop. She logged into her daughter's email account. The screen was filled with notifications. Every one of them was a password change alert. Facebook, Instagram, bank accounts, one platform after another. Almost all of them had their passwords changed within the same very short period of time. Someone who was simply sad and wanted to be alone didn't sit down and change the passwords to every account they had in a single evening. That was the behavior of someone trying to lock every door. She contacted the phone carrier and, as the owner of the family plan, requested the call records. What she found sent a chill through her. Since the night of November 22nd, Jasmine's phone had not made or received a single call. Among the long list of records, one line immediately stood out. On the night of November 22nd, Jasmine's phone records showed a 71-minute call with an unfamiliar number. It was the final phone call of her life. Her mother dialed that number right there, with the police officer standing beside her. And this time, someone answered. On the other end was the voice of a young man. He introduced himself as Jason Chen, a computer science student at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. He said that he and Jasmine had met through a dating app called Bumble and had been seeing each other for a few months, but that the relationship hadn't become serious enough for either of them to meet the other's family. That, he explained, was why Jasmine's parents had never heard his name before. His voice was calm. When he was told that Jasmine was missing, he said that he hadn't heard from her in several days either. The last time they spoke, he said, the conversation had lasted only a few minutes. Jasmine's mother then confronted him about the 71-minute call. This time, the other end of the line suddenly went silent for a few seconds. Then he changed his story. "Oh, right," he said. "Now I remember. Yes, we did talk. I just forgot about it earlier." A normal person doesn't forget a phone call that lasted more than an hour, especially one that took place only 4 days earlier with a woman he was dating. Jasmine's mother looked at the officer standing beside her, silently pleading for help. But the police response remained the same. The young man would be noted as a potential person of interest, and the specialized unit would look into him when they came on duty. Jasmine's mother begged for just one thing: to obtain the parking lot surveillance footage and find out who had driven the Chevrolet there. But that request was denied as well. So that night, in the middle of a dark parking lot, Jasmine's mother was left standing alone with her phone in her hand. She looked down, about to call a tow truck to bring her daughter's car home, and in that moment, her eyes stopped on a message she had somehow failed to notice for the past 4 days. The message had been sent from Jasmine's number at 2:18 a.m. on November 23rd. It had been sitting further up in the message thread, pushed out of sight by all the texts her mother had sent in the days that followed. The message contained only a location pin, pointing directly to a set of coordinates on a map. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. The coordinates led to an address, 110 Tremont Street, an old 4-story apartment building on the north side of the city, about a 30-minute walk from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga campus. Less than 20 minutes later, the entire family was standing outside the building, but a location pin could only identify the building. It couldn't tell them which apartment. So they began knocking on doors one by one, holding up Jasmine's photograph and asking each resident whether they'd seen her. They even searched through the large trash dumpster in the courtyard. But no one recognized Jasmine. Then they reached an apartment on the second floor, and there was no answer from inside. Jasmine's mother looked down at the location marker on her phone. It was almost directly on top of where she was standing. She pounded on the door over and over. Still, no one answered. Then she turned and knocked on the door of the apartment right next to it. The woman who lived there said that a few nights earlier, she'd been awakened by a scream. It was a woman's voice, shouting words she couldn't make out, but the sound was filled with panic. She'd been frightened enough to pick up her phone and consider calling the police, and she remembered the exact time displayed on the screen, 2:11 a.m. After the scream, she heard a flurry of footsteps rushing toward the front door, followed by the sound of the door slamming shut. Then, everything went silent. Because she heard nothing else afterward, she never made the call. She told Jasmine's family that, looking back, she should have called that night. At 2:11 a.m., there was a scream. At 2:18 a.m., Jasmine sent the location pin. 7 minutes. That was the gap between those two moments. Jasmine's mother couldn't wait any longer. She pulled a credit card from her wallet and slid it into the gap in the door. The building was old, and the door had an old-style spring latch. With a slight push, it popped open. Inside was a small, cluttered one-bedroom apartment. Near the entrance was a notebook, and on the first page, the owner's name was clearly written, Jason Chen. On the kitchen counter sat Jasmine's toiletry bag, placed neatly as though its owner might return at any moment to pick it up. Beside it, her driver's license and several bank cards were scattered around. Cleaning supplies were sitting ready inside a desk drawer, but Jasmine was nowhere to be found. The family called the police for the second time. This time, several officers arrived. They entered the apartment, looked around for about 3 minutes, spoke with the neighbors, and then left. Before leaving, they warned the family not to enter the apartment again without permission. But by then, Jasmine's mother had realized something. If she simply sat and waited, no one was going to search for her daughter. She went back into the apartment, not once but several times over the hours that followed. She searched every corner and took anything she believed might contain a clue. Notebooks, several phones, a tablet, and a camera. She also hired an attorney and had that attorney contact the district attorney's office directly to pressure the police. This time, it worked. An investigator named Zach Crawford was assigned to the case. He obtained a search warrant, and near midnight, police officially entered the apartment with full legal authority. The first thing Crawford noticed was that something didn't make sense. The apartment was extremely messy, with belongings scattered everywhere. Yet the air was thick with the smell of cleaning chemicals. Someone who neglected an apartment that badly had no reason to suddenly deep clean it, unless what needed to be cleaned wasn't dust. Then he looked down at the wooden floor beside the sofa and noticed a stain with an unusual color. His experience told him it could be a partial footprint. The crime scene team was called in. They discovered that the coffee table, sofa, and rug all showed signs of having been moved recently. The bedroom carpet still bore deep impressions, indicating that furniture had stood in the same place for a long time before being shifted somewhere else, as though someone had been trying to hide something underneath. A kitchen knife was lying on the bed. Broken pieces of glass were scattered across the living room floor. Finally, the crime scene team sprayed a chemical reagent throughout the apartment. It was designed to reveal traces of blood that had been cleaned away. The result was shocking. The living room, bedroom, and bathroom all lit up. The lead investigator later testified in court that it was the largest amount of blood he'd ever seen at a crime scene in his entire career. Even after the killer had cleaned the apartment, what remained still amounted to more than 1 liter. In the dumpster outside, police found a pair of sneakers and a pair of blue pants that had been thrown away. DNA testing later confirmed what everyone had already suspected. The blood inside the apartment belonged to Jasmine Pace. At that point, what had begun as a missing person case had escalated into something far more serious. But one major question still had no answer. The blood was there. So where was Jasmine? The answer was hidden in the cameras. A neighbor provided footage from a doorbell camera. Throughout November 23rd, Jason Chen was seen entering and leaving the building repeatedly. At one point, he had a scarf wrapped around his head, sunglasses on, and one hand shoved into his pocket. At another, he wore a medical mask with a dark piece of cloth wrapped around his right hand. Surveillance cameras from stores in the area captured him as well. That day, he went shopping twice at 2 different locations. He bought adhesive bandages, hydrogen peroxide, rubbing alcohol, rubber gloves, paper towels, and heavy-duty black trash bags. At the self-checkout, an overhead camera clearly captured the white sneakers he was wearing. They were the same shoes later found in the dumpster outside the apartment building. Then, at around 6 p.m. on November 23rd, the cameras captured one final image. A figure wearing a light-colored hooded jacket was struggling to drag a large suitcase from the entrance of the building toward the parking lot. From the way the figure moved, it was clear the suitcase was extremely heavy. Whoever was pulling it had to keep switching hands and shifting their weight. A few minutes later, a black Toyota Camry drove out of the parking lot. On November 29th, exactly 1 week after Jasmine left home, police found Jason Chen at his parents' house in Nolensville, about 100 miles from Chattanooga. When he was arrested, he remained calm but deeply defensive. Police noted cuts on his right hand and foot. Phone data also showed that after Jasmine disappeared, he'd traveled to Nashville International Airport, but financial records proved that he had never purchased a ticket. Even after his arrest, Jason Chen said nothing about where Jasmine was. But phone location data doesn't know how to lie. Police extracted the device's entire travel history beginning on November 22nd and followed each stop along the way. On December 1st, investigators arrived along a riverside road called Suck Creek, northwest of the city. As they walked along the riverbank, one investigator spotted something caught in the dense kudzu vines covering the slope. It was a large, hard-shell suitcase with wheels and an extendable handle. It took several men considerable effort to pull it free from the tangled vines. They placed it on the ground. One investigator put on gloves, bent down, and slowly unzipped it. Inside the suitcase were black trash bags, stacked on top of one another and packed tightly inside. No one could see what was beneath them. But everyone standing there already knew the answer. 3 layers of trash bags. Inside was Jasmine Pace, who had been missing for 8 days. She weighed about 97 pounds. To fit her body inside the suitcase, her wrists had been handcuffed to her ankles, forcing her entire body into a tightly curled fetal position. They weren't standard police handcuffs. They were toy handcuffs, the kind sold in novelty shops. The chain on one of the 2 sets of cuffs had snapped. The autopsy report by Dr. Stephen Cogswell, the Hamilton County medical examiner, was later presented in court. Jasmine's body had 60 stab wounds. What was unusual was not the number itself. It was the fact that all 60 wounds were concentrated within a small area that Dr. Cogswell described as roughly the size of a sheet of A4 paper. They were clustered around her scalp, face, chin, neck, and right shoulder. Every stab wound traveled in the same direction, from right to left. The weapon was not an ordinary table knife, but a broad-bladed knife of the kind commonly used by chefs. One stab was so forceful that it penetrated her chest and broke off the tip of the blade. The metal fragment remained inside her body and was removed during the autopsy. Dr. Cogswell told the jury that this was not a quick death. He estimated that it took Jasmine about 5 minutes to die, certainly less than 10. There was no alcohol or drugs in her blood. That meant that throughout that entire period, she was fully conscious. And there was another question, one that would become central to the entire case. How could all 60 stab wounds have been concentrated within such a small area? Dr. Cogswell had an answer, but he wouldn't give it until he was inside a courtroom 2 years later, and that answer would determine how one person spent the rest of his life. While searching Jason Chen's parents' home in Nolensville, police recovered a black backpack. Inside the backpack, hidden in an eyeglass case, was the SIM card removed from Jasmine's phone. Alongside it was a stack of papers covered in handwriting. It was a draft of his statement. He had sat down and written out in advance what he planned to tell police when they came looking for him. One page was titled, "The Last Time I Saw Her." But most of what he had written wasn't meant to defend himself. Most of it was meant to construct a portrait of Jasmine. He wrote that Jasmine had a habit of disappearing without telling anyone. He wrote that she had once gone through a period of homelessness. He wrote that a former boyfriend had once sought a restraining order against her. He wrote that her mother had problems with alcohol. When police pieced these notes together, they understood that they served a very clear purpose. If Jasmine could be portrayed as unstable, as someone who frequently disappeared from home, then there'd be nothing suspicious about her vanishing. And this was the cruelest part of all. Where had he gotten those details? He'd gotten them from Jasmine herself. They were things she had confided in him during their dates, because she trusted him. In the end, everything she had once opened up to him about was turned against her, used as a tool to conceal her own death. So who was Jason Chen? He was born in New York, sent to China to live with his grandparents until he was 4 years old, and then brought back to the United States. Later, he moved to Tennessee with his parents. He came from a Chinese immigrant family that ran an Asian restaurant in Nolensville. He was accepted into college right in the city where he lived. To outsiders, he seemed like the model of a dutiful son with a bright future ahead of him. But people who had gone to high school with him told a very different story. They said Jason Chen had a habit of creating fake accounts online and impersonating his own classmates to talk to other people. One female student said that he once pretended to be a friend of hers in order to message her and probe into her private life. When he was caught, he admitted it. And that wasn't all. After the case exploded into public view, a complete stranger had to go on social media to clear his own name. The man discovered that his photos were being used as profile pictures on Jason Chen's dating accounts. He had to make a video showing the original photos, complete with their posting dates, and compare them with the images on Chen's accounts to prove that he had nothing to do with any of it. What this showed was that long before the night of November 22nd, Jason Chen had already been practicing how to become someone else online. So when the time came to impersonate Jasmine, text her family, and post on her Facebook account, he didn't hesitate. It was a skill he'd been sharpening for years. And what he did the following morning is almost impossible to put into words. On the morning of November 23rd, while Jasmine's body was still inside the apartment, he used her phone to text her family, saying that she had slept really well the night before, along with a photo that digital forensic analysis would later determine had been taken 2 years earlier. That same morning, he opened a dating app and messaged another woman, telling her that the two of them were now officially dating. Later that evening, he even made plans to play online games with friends. Jason Chen's trial began on January 13, 2025. Because the case had become so well known in Chattanooga, the jury had to be selected from another county and brought in. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Cody Wamp, alongside homicide prosecutor Paul Moyle. Defense attorney Josh Weiss opened with a statement that stunned the entire courtroom. He said he wasn't there to waste anyone's time. Jason Chen had, in fact, killed Jasmine Pace. So if he'd already admitted to killing her, what was left to argue about? They were arguing over one thing: premeditation. Under American criminal law, the act of taking a life can be treated very differently depending on whether prosecutors can prove it was planned in advance. If they can, it becomes first-degree murder, with the maximum sentence potentially being life in prison without parole. But if the killing happened in a sudden burst of violence brought on by provocation, the charge can be much less severe, and the defendant may still have a chance of one day leaving prison. So the defense told a different version of what happened that night. They said the two had been drinking wine together late into the evening. Jasmine got up to get more wine when she heard a notification from a dating app on Jason's phone. She discovered that he'd been messaging other women, became jealous, grabbed a wine bottle, and attacked him. Jason picked up a knife from the table to defend himself, then blacked out, and when he came to, Jasmine was lying there. As for the handcuffs, the defense said they were only put on after she was already dead, so her body would fit inside the suitcase. On the surface, it may have sounded plausible, but the prosecution dismantled the story piece by piece. First, a digital forensics expert examined Jason Chen's phone and confirmed that throughout that entire day, his device had received no notifications from the dating app. He didn't open that app until the following morning, after everything was already over. Second, toxicology showed that there was no alcohol at all in Jasmine's blood. The story that the two of them had spent the evening drinking wine together simply didn't happen. Third, the autopsy documented that Jasmine was menstruating at the time. The entire romantic scenario the defense had constructed to lead into an outburst of jealousy did not hold up. Fourth, and this was the most damaging blow of all, the handcuffs. Dr. Cogswell testified that the location of Jasmine's wounds could only be explained if she had been restrained while she was still alive. A person stabbed 60 times who didn't fight back, who didn't have a single defensive wound on her right hand, could only have been someone who was no longer able to move. And finally, do you remember the 7 minutes I mentioned earlier? The neighbor heard a scream at 2:11 a.m. Jasmine sent the location pin at 2:18. The prosecutor pointed to that gap and told the jury, "This did not happen quickly." She screamed. She ran toward the door. She had enough time to realize she was in danger and send her location to her mother. And only then, 7 minutes later, came what happened next. 7 minutes was more than enough time for someone to stop. The defense still tried to attack the fact that Jasmine's family had entered the apartment several times before police obtained a search warrant. Sitting in the gallery, Jasmine's mother felt her heart tighten. This was the thing she feared most. But that fear never became reality. One juror later explained it very simply. Yes, anyone who entered that apartment inevitably disturbed the scene to some extent, but it didn't affect their decision, because the defense had admitted from the very beginning that their client had killed her. On January 20th, 2025, the jury retired to deliberate at 4:12 p.m. At 4:56, they returned, and they delivered their verdict. Jason Chen was found guilty of premeditated first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. One juror later said something that I think many people will remember for a long time. He said that 60 stab wounds meant 120 choices. Every time the knife went in, that was a choice. Every time it came back out, that was another choice. The next day was sentencing. The jury had to decide one thing: whether this 24-year-old man should have a chance at parole after spending 51 years in prison. And that was when two mothers found themselves in the same courtroom. Jason Chen's mother took the witness stand first. She didn't speak English and had to testify through an interpreter. She cried for the entire 20 minutes. She said her son was a child who knew right from wrong, who had never gotten into a fight with anyone, and that theirs was a law-abiding family that had raised him to study hard and work honestly. She recalled once telling her son, "Mom doesn't speak English. I can't help you very much. You have to work hard on your own." And her son had replied, "I know how hard you work at the restaurant. I'm about to graduate. Once I get a job and start earning money, you won't have to work anymore." The defense attorney asked her several times whether she wanted to say anything to Jasmine's parents. In reality, he was throwing her a lifeline. During sentencing, even a single apology might have allowed the jury to see some sign of remorse. But throughout those 20 minutes, she spoke only about her son. What she asked was for the other family to give her son a chance to one day come home. "I'm not going to judge this mother." This was a woman who had spent her life in a foreign country, working in the kitchen of a small restaurant to put her son through school, and who still couldn't accept that the son she knew and the person who had done this were the same man. Her tragedy is the tragedy of many parents, loving their child so deeply that they can no longer see who that child truly is. Throughout the trial, Jason Chen didn't say a single word. He didn't testify in his own defense or explain his motive. There was only one moment when he cried, and that was while listening to his mother speak. That day, Jasmine's mother did not give a statement. The person who walked to the podium was Jasmine's cousin. She placed a glass jar on the table. Then she began dropping stones into it, one by one. She continued slowly until she reached the 60th stone. Each stone represented one stab wound on Jasmine's body. The stones struck the bottom of the glass jar with a sharp, hollow clink, one after another, inside a courtroom that had gone completely silent. This time, the jury again needed less than an hour. Jason Chen was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, with the aggravating circumstance stated clearly in the judgment. The offense was especially heinous and involved torture and abuse of the victim beyond what was necessary to cause death. After the trial, District Attorney Cody Womp told reporters something worth thinking about. She said, "If Jasmine's family had not taken action themselves, had not searched on their own, had not pushed for answers, police might never have had enough grounds to obtain a search warrant. It was the family who drove this investigation forward." But the story didn't end there. While the trial was still underway, Jasmine's family filed a civil lawsuit against Jason Chen and his parents, seeking $17 million in damages, including $12 million in compensatory damages and $5 million in punitive damages. The lawsuit alleged that his parents had concealed and sheltered their son during the days when he was the primary suspect, while also providing him with money and information. In March 2025, Jason Chen's parents reached a settlement. The amount was not disclosed, and the court record didn't state whether they admitted any liability. The case against Jason Chen himself continued, but the court stayed the proceedings until all criminal matters were completed. His civil attorney also withdrew, citing the fact that his client could no longer afford to pay. 3 days after he was sentenced, Jason Chen's attorneys filed a motion for a new trial, raising 24 arguments that their client had not received a fair trial. The central issue remained the same. Jasmine's family had entered the apartment before police obtained a search warrant, and the defense argued that this had compromised the evidence. It took more than a year for the motion to be considered. On May 4th, 2026, Judge Boyd Patterson rejected every argument. He explained that the chain of custody didn't have to be absolutely perfect. It only had to meet the minimum legal standard and show no evidence of tampering. And in this case, there was no indication that any tampering had occurred. The defense had 30 days to appeal to a higher court. As of the time I'm making this video, in mid-2026, Jason Chen remains in the Tennessee State Prison System, serving life without parole. The chances of overturning his conviction are very low. In the end, I have to be honest with you. To make this video, I read through almost every document I could find about this case. And after finishing all of it, there was still one question I couldn't resolve. The killer's motive. What conflict could there have been between him and Jasmine? What kind of grudge could possibly have driven him to go that far? Or was he simply someone who wanted to see another person suffer? I don't have the answer. And what's frightening is that the court didn't have one either. The court proved who did it, how it was done, what time it happened, and that it had been planned in advance. But even when he was given one final chance to speak, he remained silent. In the end, Jasmine's family did get justice, but what they will never have is an answer to the question, why my daughter? What do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'll read every one of them, and if you believe this story deserves to be known by more people, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. And that's where today's video ends.